Mercedes could lose points, not because the trick was illegal, but because the FIA can now prove how it was used. A hidden engine exploit. Completely legal on paper. Capable of delivering up to 130 extra horsepower in the final meters of the lap, where pole position is decided. No warning. No visible system. No obvious advantage. Just one impossible detail. The car wasn't slowing down when every other car had to. And that tiny difference was worth nearly 2/10 per lap. Enough to secure positions. Enough for Russell and Antonelli to maximize results. Enough to shape the early championship. Until Ferrari saw it. One pattern. One anomaly. One question to the FIA. And everything changed. Because the moment the FIA started monitoring intent, the advantage didn't just disappear. It became a threat. Because now, it's not just about losing performance. It's about what happens to everything that came before. Lap times. Results. Points. Which means one thing. Mercedes is no longer just fighting on track. They could be fighting to keep everything they've already won. At first, it didn't look like a controversy. It looked like precision. Because Mercedes wasn't dominating the entire lap. They weren't clearly faster in every sector. But when it mattered most, they always delivered. The final seconds. The last straight. That final push to the line. That's where everything changed. And in Formula One, that's everything. Because those final meters decide pole position. They decide track position. They decide who controls the race before it even begins. But here's what made it so dangerous. There was no visible advantage. No obvious boost. No aggressive engine mode. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Just less loss. While every other car slowed down, Mercedes didn't. And that's almost impossible to detect. Because gaining speed is obvious. But not losing it. That hides in plain sight. So session after session, that hidden advantage kept working. Quietly. Consistently. Helping Russell. Helping Antonelli. Building results that looked completely normal from the outside. But inside the data, something didn't add up. Because when Ferrari zoomed in, when they focused only on the final meters, the pattern broke. Every other car followed the same behavior. Energy drops. Power fades. Speed falls. That's the rule. That's the system. That's physics. Except for one car. Mercedes. Their speed held. Sometimes, it even increased. Exactly where it shouldn't. And that's the moment everything changes. Because in Formula One, if the data doesn't match physics, there is always a reason. And once that reason starts to appear, it doesn't stay hidden for long. Because patterns like that don't happen by accident. They happen because something is controlling them. And the moment you realize that, you're no longer looking at performance. You're looking at something much bigger. Something built into the system itself. Something that, once exposed, doesn't just disappear. It puts everything at risk. And that's when Ferrari made the move that changed everything. They didn't try to copy it. They didn't experiment quietly. They didn't keep it inside the garage. They went straight to the FIA. And they asked one question. Is this allowed? Now that might sound simple. Routine. Something every team does. But in Formula One, that question is dangerous. Because the moment it's asked, everything gets exposed. The FIA has to investigate. They have to go deeper than lap times. Deeper than performance. Into the system itself. Into the exact moment where the car behaves differently. And once they looked there, the pattern became clear. Right before the finish line. At the exact point where every car should begin to lose speed. Mercedes did something no one else was doing. They didn't accept the gradual loss. They didn't follow the expected behavior. They shut the system off. Completely. No transition. No resistance. And in that instant, everything changed. Because the moment the MGUK stops, it stops recovering energy. It stops slowing the car down. It stops creating that invisible drag every other car has to fight. So the engine keeps pushing, but nothing is holding it back anymore. And in those final meters, that creates the advantage. Up to 130 horsepower, exactly where the lap is decided. The car crosses the line. The time is locked. The result is secured. And only then, the penalty activates. 60 seconds without the system. But it happens after the lap. When the driver is already lifting. Cooling the tires. Returning to the pits. So the penalty exists, but it changes nothing. And that's what made it so effective. A rule designed to prevent this behavior. Used perfectly to create it. But that's also why it couldn't survive. Because once the FIA understood the intent, the entire situation changed. This was no longer just clever engineering. It became a question of control, of predictability, of safety. And from that moment on, everything Mercedes does is being watched. Every shutdown, every anomaly, every single trace in the data. And that's where the real danger begins. Because now, it's not just about the future. It's about the past. And this is where everything becomes truly dangerous for Mercedes. Because once the FIA starts looking into the past, they're not just checking performance. They're reconstructing intent. Every qualifying lap, every shutdown of the system, every single moment where the car behaved differently. And now, all of that data means something else. Because before, it was just performance. Now, it's evidence. And that changes the entire situation. Because this wasn't a one-time event. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't random. It was repeatable, controlled, used at the exact same point, lap after lap, across multiple race weekends. And that's where the risk explodes. Because if the FIA can prove that the system was deliberately used for performance gain, then everything built on those laps becomes questionable. Not automatically illegal, but no longer unquestionable. And in Formula One, that distinction matters. Because once results are questioned, they can be reviewed. And once they're reviewed, they can be changed. Lap times can be deleted. Qualifying positions can be reassigned. Race outcomes can shift. And in extreme cases, points can be taken away. Not just going forward, but from what has already been awarded. And that's the scenario hanging over Mercedes right now. Because Russell and Antonelli didn't just drive those laps. They depended on them. Those final tenths, those last meters, that invisible advantage, it helped define their starting positions. It helped define their races. It helped define their points. And now, all of that is under scrutiny. Not confirmed. Not decided. But possible. And that's enough. Because in Formula One, possibility like that creates pressure instantly. Inside the garage. Inside the strategy room. Inside the cockpit. Because now, every result has a question attached to it. Every performance has to be defended. Every advantage has to be explained. And that's a completely different kind of fight. Because it's no longer just about speed. It's about credibility. About legitimacy. About proving that what you achieved still stands. And while all of this is happening, the season continues. The next race arrives. The next qualifying session begins. And Mercedes has to perform under full scrutiny. Without the trick. Without the margin. Without the safety net. And with every move being watched. Every lap analyzed. Every result questioned. And that's where the real test begins. Because losing performance is one thing. But racing while everything you've already achieved is being questioned, that's something else entirely. And now, for the first time this season, that's exactly the position Mercedes finds itself in. And this is where everything reaches its final breaking point. Because once doubt enters the championship, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. Across the paddock. Across the media. Across every single result that Mercedes has achieved so far. Because now, the question is no longer just technical. It's historical. What was real, and what was influenced? And that question is dangerous. Because Formula One is built on precision. On trust in the stopwatch. On the belief that every lap represents pure performance. But when that trust is shaken, everything becomes uncertain. Because now, every pole position is analyzed differently. Every gap is questioned. Every tenth is examined. Was it the car? Was it the driver? Or was it something hidden in the final meters? And that uncertainty changes how rivals react. Because Ferrari knows they didn't use it. They know their data is clean. They know their performance is untouched. So now, they push harder. With confidence. With clarity. With the certainty that what they gain is real. And that makes them more dangerous than ever. But for Mercedes, it's the opposite. Because now, they don't just need to be fast. They need to prove it. Every lap. Every session. Every weekend. And that pressure builds. Because in Formula One, when you have something to prove, you drive differently. You take fewer risks. Or sometimes, too many. Trying to silence the doubt. Trying to show that the speed is still there. But that's where mistakes appear. Because pressure doesn't just affect performance. It distorts it. And when performance is distorted, the gap grows. Not always immediately. Not always visibly. But inevitably. And that's where the championship begins to shift. Because if Mercedes drops even slightly, if Russell loses a front row, if Antonelli misses a key opportunity, if the results stop matching what we saw before, then the narrative changes completely. Not slowly. Instantly. Because in Formula One, momentum is everything. And once it's lost, it's incredibly hard to recover. But here's the final truth. Because this moment is not just about Mercedes. It's about the entire season. The moment where everything hidden becomes visible. The moment where performance is no longer influenced by something nobody can see. Just the car, the driver, the execution, nothing else. And that's why what comes next matters more than anything we've seen so far. Because now, there are no excuses, no variables, no invisible advantages, just reality. And reality in Formula One is ruthless, because it exposes everything. Strengths, weaknesses, truth. And when that truth finally appears, there will be no more debate, no more doubt, no more questions. Only one answer. Who was actually fast? And who was just benefiting from something that no longer exists?